Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining me, Nathan. It's exciting to get a chance to talk to you. Um, I know Jane, again, highly recommended your insight. So I'm really just curious to hear your stories today and any tips and tricks you have for job seekers, career staff, anyone in this world of trying to help people take that next step in their career journey and the folks themselves. But I always like to get started by just learning a bit about you and your career journey and kind of hear some of the highlights of how you got, from where you started to where you are now. So maybe just to kick things off, would you mind sharing a little bit of your background?
Yeah, it's been a journey, I guess I'll say. So academically, I graduated in '99 from Mount Allison with a BA in International Relations.
Okay.
Then UNB in 2001 with a master's degree in military history.
Wow.
So yeah, I was envisioning a very different career path than what I've taken.
Yeah.
So 2001, I graduated. I went through the recent grad struggle, I would say, that well educated, but my job experience at that time was Radio Shack, Pizza Hut, very service level jobs like a lot of people have.
Yes.
And so after that, I moved to Truro. So I was living in rural Nova Scotia, and went through about 3 years of really struggling. So would tend to do all the things I tell people not to do now. So, I would just do online job searching, send out my resume, hope for the best. And, went through 3 years where, post graduation, where I really struggled and, was doing survival jobs.
Yeah.
And, really went through this, it was very hard mentally, thinking of invested all this time and money in an education, and then no one would even give me an opportunity to get my career started.
Absolutely.
So 2004, I sucked out my pride and I went to work in the call center industry. So I had my master's degree working for Convergys. And I spent my first year with Convergys taking phone calls. So I was an agent. And the reason I went into that world, not that I wanted to be in the call center world for my career,
Hmm.
but I thought it was a good way to get experience. That I felt my resume was very heavy on education, very light on experience. Call center world is known for, I'll say high turnover. So, I looked at it that if I did a decent job, I could probably move up, get some experience to balance out my education. So, which did work. I ended up spending 5 years with Convergys, started for years an agent, became a trainer after that for about 6 months. Then I moved into becoming a sales manager and operations manager. So I had, really went from the bottom to the top of the call center that I was working in.
Yeah. Wow.
Wound up at the end of it, managing 130 agents, 7 managers.
Wow.
1/3 of the site was reporting into me. So it was quite a quick transition from being brand new agent on the phone to suddenly I'm managing, millions of dollars worth of responsibilities.
Yeah.
Never really enjoyed that industry. It was, it's a high pressure, high burnout industry, but it does give you great experience. And so in 2009, I was actually part of a mass layoff that Convergys did. So I went to work one day and 140 of us lost our jobs in one shot.
Wow.
Yeah, my first experience with, Fortune 500s and, some of the instability, I'll say, that arises out of them. But we were a top performing site, but some payroll rebates ended. Our dollar was very high, and it was just a bad combination. Now looking back, it was a blessing, and I'd encourage anyone listening to this: if you ever do go through a layoff in your career, it is a truly it's an opportunity. So it's a bit of a shock to the system, but I look back now, 15 years later, and say thank you. If anyone from Convergys hears this, thanks for giving me my walking papers 15 years ago, because that really spurred me. One, I moved from Truro to Halifax, so I came here in early 2010. No job, no network, didn't know anybody. Just I wanted to come where the opportunities were.
Right.
So from there, I was very selective with my first job. By that time I had a few years experience, but still not that marketable, I would say. And so I went to work for Xerox, doing inside sales. So I was part of about 100 people in Burnside who was doing inside sales and account management for Xerox. really great company, great training program, and learned a lot. Um, Along about 2.5 years in, I was approached over LinkedIn by ADP, Automatic Data Processing, the payroll company.
Right. Yeah.
And they were looking to grow their inside sales team in Halifax. So they had actually approached a number of us from Xerox. So in mid 2012, I made the move from Xerox to ADP.
Wow.
And so it was, ADP was great. We were in virtually doing sales and account management into remote parts of Canada. So, I got to work with companies under 1,000 employees, really doing end-to-end B2B sales. So right from prospecting through to, demoing and closing the deals. Really enjoyed that. Learned a lot with ADP. And it was also one of my first indications of how powerful LinkedIn is, because had I not been on LinkedIn, that job would not have found me. So I spent about 3 years with ADP and went through another layoff. So we got the nondescript meeting invitation with a senior VP in human resources for one morning, and I kind of knew what was coming. I've seen this movie before.
Right.
So showed up. They laid my whole team off and moved the jobs to another area in Canada. So then I'm now at another transition point. So by this time I was had done this B2B work for a few years, and the call center, and really wanted to get out of that world where I was doing inside work. So sitting in Halifax, but interacting with other parts of North America, and made the decision then to get into the world of recruiting, or try to. So I went to work for Kelly Services, which is one of the Fortune 500 staffing companies.
Yes, I know them all.
Yeah, so they, I sold them on the idea that doing business development for recruiting really wasn't much different than doing it for payroll. Same buyer, different conversation. And they bought into that idea.
Wow.
So, and that was my first time really doing something in person, where I was networking locally and getting to know how recruiting works from the business side rather than the candidate side. So learned a lot with Kelly Services. It was purely business development and really learning the nature of the conversations and the industry. From there, I was actually about 8 or 9 months into my time with Kelly. I was approached by Adecco, who were one of their big competitors, again through LinkedIn, to interview for their branch manager role. So
Wow.
suddenly I went, within a span of less than a year, I went from never having worked in the recruiting industry to now I'm being interviewed for, to run a multi-million-dollar branch. Ended up going through 9 interviews over 3 months with Adecco.
Wow.
Um, yeah, started with a phone recruiter in Toronto, ended with the president of the company 9 interviews later. And so they did a very thorough interview.
No
And
joke.
so yeah, it was no joke. Everybody wanted to kind of be involved in that process.
What was that role?
So it was for branch manager of the Halifax branch, which covers all of Nova Scotia and Newfoundland.
Gotcha.
And what they really wanted to see, the reason it involved so many interviews, was they wanted me because I knew how to sell in their industry. Not because I was an experienced recruiter or branch manager. I knew how to sell the business. And that was really what was important to them. So, and I had a vision from what I'd identified with Kelly, where there were opportunities. I had a vision where I thought I could, take Adecco and, leverage what I had learned the last year. They all really liked the idea. So, 9 interviews later, I got the job. And that was really, trial by fire, because I had dozens of employees who were out on contract, on sites with clients. We're filling permanent roles in a number of different sectors. So it was learning while I was doing, I'll say. It was a lot. Now, the one thing I found challenging with that role, and with Kelly as well, is on the staffing side of the business. So within the world of recruiting, there's permanent recruiting where companies are paying you a fee to find a chief financial officer or a software developer or any number of roles. Then
Right.
there's the staffing side where you've actually got people on your payroll doing contracts at client sites. Managing dozens of contract employees that you don't interact with has its own challenges, I'll say.
No doubt.
And And it's, a very low margin business, very competitive. There's lots of companies doing it. But, it definitely felt good at the end of the day to help people get jobs. And I did enjoy, I had the satisfaction from that. So I saw the job I'm currently in posted almost 7 years ago now. And it seemed like it would be a blend of what I enjoyed about recruiting and getting rid of what I didn't enjoy about recruiting. So yeah, I applied for this job with Halifax Partnership in July of, I don't know, 2017. And yeah, I was fortunate enough to get the job, and I've now been doing it for about 6.5 years. And yeah, it's been the best job of my life.
Oh, that's unreal, Nathan. That's why I try to always ask this question because I feel like it gives so much context to the insight and advice, I will hear from you in the rest of the episode today, but it comes from someone who's been through it. I think it's so valuable for job seekers and staff to hear that, hey, there was a really difficult 3-year period at the beginning of your journey where you were
Yeah.
working survival jobs. That is a story I hear all the time from students that we work with that, hey, the only job experience I have is Tim Hortons. What do I do with that? But, your story kind of goes to show you do develop these skill sets along the way that kind of, to your point, took you from struggling to find a job to being headhunted for a job. Um,
Yeah, it's
that's
it's
so
kind of
cool.
it's a strange development because I've been through about, when I counted, around 70 interviews as a candidate in my, professional career. And that's including jobs I got and I didn't get, and ones that I was offered and turned down. So I've really, learned through trial and error what works in interviewing. And then it's been really interesting, working on the other side of the table now for 8 or 9 years and seeing, okay, what do recruiters look for? What do job seekers often do well, or more, what do they not do well? So yeah, strangely enough, even though my journey was really painful at times, it's actually the journey I went through made me really good at my job now, because I didn't just walk out of school into a big time job. I've been through the struggle. I've screwed a lot of things up. Um, and you kind of, what I found, and what I would say to anyone listening to this, is you have to build your overall skill set. And that's what I did. It took, you had to invest years. That it was starting in the call center doing sales. Sales was really my way to open the doors to get the experience I wanted. And yeah, it does work. Some people get very lucky and you just, right person, right time, you get your dream job. A lot of us though have to hustle and go through the struggles and, get a little bit dirty in the journey, trying to get to where we want to go.
100%. And you sort of need to be in the role, like you said earlier, to figure out the parts you like and don't like. And then in your next role, you find a way to kind of filter those things out and, then end up in a position like you're in today. So I always try to encourage students to take some of those leaps, even if they're unsure whether or not they'll enjoy everything. You really can't know till you're in it. Um,
Yeah.
and
And
yeah, go ahead.
yeah, and I don't think, people want to approach a job always expecting you're going to enjoy every minute of it. If that job exists, good luck finding it. Most jobs you'll have highs and lows. And it's important that you can go through the highs and lows of jobs, because sometimes it's going to be tough. You're going to have hard deliverables, or you're going to have a boss that's breathing down your neck. And with the perseverance to get through those hard times and not just say, the hell with this, I'm going to go somewhere else. That's really important. That perseverance and mental toughness, I think, in your career is a key thing to work to develop.
I couldn't agree more. And, for someone who went through 70 interviews, I think that holds a lot of weight in terms of perseverance. And you made an interesting comment about having learned what worked and didn't work, having gone through that many interviews. On the interviewee side, what did you start to notice worked for you?
What I really found early in my career, I looked at interviews as, I'm just going in to answer some questions. And so I would often, essentially wing it. And, you start to hear some of the same questions over and over, and you think that you know them. But it was really, that's how I approached it. I'm just going in to talk to them, answer some questions. The further I went in my career and as I advanced, I came to find out pretty quickly that it's a sales presentation. When you're interviewing, you are selling a solution to a business problem. And that doing the research on the company to understand how your solution can impact their business problems is really important. And then overall preparing for the interview. That what I do now and what I suggest people do is, look at a job posting, copy it before you ever apply. So you've got a Word version of it. Then when you do get the interview call, look for themes and, what are the kind of core themes that are in the job posting? And then write talking points about yourself and your background. And then really I found it studying that. So, understand you're going to get the question, tell me about yourself. Okay, write down some bullet points. What do you want to mention? And I've seen people when they get that question lose the job. It's the first question they get asked, and they essentially lose the job on that question because they've nothing prepared. Or in my case, I actually had someone give an hour-long answer to that question once, and so that right, yeah,
And
that in
it's
itself kind of
oh, sorry.
yeah. Yeah, I was going to say that answer in itself told me that that person was not going to be a fit because one question took them an hour. So, preparation is the key, but understand what is your value proposition. So, what are your best selling points? What have you accomplished? And how does that relate to the employer that you're going to interview with? And that's what I found really worked for me as a candidate. And what I've seen work well now that I've been interviewing people. It's actually amazing how many people show up to interviews completely unprepared.
Huh.
Um, and when you ask them the question, I'll say, "Why do you want to work here?" Which really should be a softball question. People, a lot of people have done no research on, I'll say, my organization now, and I'll get just a rambling political answer about how they need a job and we look really cool, but nothing that's actually selling why they're a good fit, why I should hire them. So that's the biggest thing I see interviewees make is lack of preparation for one, lack of professionalism. So either showing up late, showing up extraordinarily early and being kind of in the way, not dressing the part. So, I've interviewed people for my team that, have come in shorts and a t-shirt. Um, we're not really a shorts and a t-shirt type of organization to interview with.
Right.
So, but a moderate amount of preparation, people could avoid a lot of that.
That
So
is,
yeah, that's on the candidate side, kind of what's worked for me, and I'd say what hasn't worked for me.
well, it's a interesting piece of advice because I feel like it's so tangible and it's something that you can so easily change as a job seeker. Doing that research is part of the excitement, I think, of looking at the job. What is the company doing? What kind of goals are they working towards? It does make so much sense to know that heading into the interview. And, to your point, it's not just a chance to answer questions. It is a chance to solve a problem, but you need to know what that problem is heading into it. I think that's a really great way to describe it. So again, for job seekers listening, doing doing just that little bit of research, it sounds like can put you, miles ahead of the mass of people that might be applying.
I think it can because inevitably during the interview, you're going to get asked questions about, how you can add value to an organization. And or even if you're not directly asked the question, you want to, prove, illustrate some of that in your answers. So
Mhm.
I think if you haven't gone through and read, annual reports, recent news listings, then you really don't know how you can add value to that organization. And if you're not prepared or the listener's not prepared going into that interview, statistically, at least one person will be really well prepared and they will shine and they will put everyone else to shame.
Right.
And I always say job searching is like sales. And if people have done B2B sales in particular, I'll say it's a very close transition because when a company is looking to buy a product or a service, they'll put out an RFP, a request for proposals, that says, we have this challenge. We want people to submit bids on how they're going to solve our problem.
Right.
All kinds of companies will submit a bid. It's essentially the same with job, when they're hiring. They've got a business problem they need to solve. The job posting is an RFP.
Yes.
So when you submit, a response to an RFP, if you just put buy our product, we're really good, you're not going to win that business. It's the company that actually demonstrates this is why our product is the best fit based on, the proposal that you put out. So I think it's very much the same thing, that you have to understand how your skills, and it doesn't necessarily just mean, the direct skills for the job, but even soft skills, how that can, relate and help that business solve whatever challenge they have.
Again, just yeah, super clarifying, Nathan. I think it's these little things that add up. It's what you said about, write some talking points. Don't get caught off guard by tell me about yourself, because now you're on the spot and say something overly personal or long-winded. There are,
Mhm.
some things you probably want to articulate there, and then getting a sense of, yeah, specifically how you can help this company. I'm sure now on the other side of the table, it's pretty clear the people who have done that. And so, in this role now where you're interviewing people, um, do any stories come to mind about someone who did the research and kind of went over and above and stands out in your mind? Of course, kind of keeping, it anonymous, but just from a high level.
Yeah, I there's been one actually interview I've done that really did stand out, and it wasn't for my team. It was actually another role in our organization. I was on the panel,
Yeah.
and the person had really researched the organization. And so when we started to say, ask some questions about how their skills could benefit us, they were able to pinpoint work that we were doing and how individual skills related to different things that we were involved in, and gave really concise 3 to 5 minute answers for every question, and not rambling answers or political answers where people just talk and talk and talk, but they're not actually answering the question.
Yeah.
They very very tight answers, and it stood out. Everyone, and that was the first person we interviewed for that job. Everyone else afterwards, it was, well, yeah, they were okay, but man, they didn't come anywhere as close as the first person,
Okay.
and that was the person who got the job. So I have seen it work really well. And even, in my own, when I was interviewing for a Halifax partnership, I really went through and understood the connector program. What are they doing? How's my background a fit? So that I really could try and tailor my responses to exactly what their business challenges were.
Okay. That's a helpful story, I think. So again, for those listening, it's doing that preparation and having those specific contributions in mind to how you can be an asset to the team. Um, Maybe to take a step back, Nathan, just because I want to make sure I get your insight on something else you mentioned, and that was around LinkedIn. You did develop all these skills, and you kind of, noticed this yourself that by putting that on LinkedIn, you started finding opportunities. So I think even leading up to the interview, you can start listing some of these things that you can contribute to a company. Do you have any insights on, how did you approach creating your LinkedIn profile? Did you reach out to people? Um, or any insights just on using LinkedIn as a whole to connect?
Yeah. So initially, early on in my career, I honestly didn't put a lot of effort into LinkedIn. It was still a little bit of an unknown product, in the 2010, we'll say.
Hey.
So, I had a base profile created, and it was really after I started getting companies reaching out to me, and it happened pretty consistently from Xerox to ADP to Kelly Services, where I would get different offers. And that's really when it started jumping out to me how important it was. And then when I actually got into the world of recruiting, and I would use LinkedIn to source candidates
Right.
that, when, let's say, we had an embedded software developer role, I'm going to put it on the job boards to target the active job seekers. I'm going to, use LinkedIn and actually target specifically people that I'm interested in. So it was kind of targeting more of a passive job seeker. But LinkedIn gets used extensively for that. You see all the people that have recruiting licenses, and really it's become like catalog shopping for recruiters, that
Huh.
you can pop in a series of skills you're looking for, and it will give you a series of people that are in that geographic area.
I see.
So over time, what I've started, and I do a lot of talking on LinkedIn because I am a big believer in it. When it came to connecting with people, I would really just start trying to connect with everybody. Sometimes it would be a certain company. Sometimes I may just pick a job title and search for vice presidents in Halifax and see who comes up and just connect with them.
Yeah.
And then gradually over time, as I became more comfortable with the platform, I really started using it as a way to, get my face and my name out there. So it's a great marketing tool for, an individual that for very little work, you can get your face and your name in front of your network, repeatedly. And by doing that, it really has the subconscious effect of establishing you as a thought leader, I would say, within the business world or a certain sector. Now, for people that are brand new in their career or very early on, be realistic about the odds of recruiters reaching out to you. I find it happened the further I went in my career, the more unique my background was, the more something would stick out to a recruiter. So if it's your first job out of university and you've never really had a professional job before, still have LinkedIn, still engage on the platform, still, post things, share things, but you may not get recruiters reaching out right away.
Okay.
But the further you go in your career, it will expose you to opportunities which otherwise you would not get access to. Whether you want to take them all is another question. Then it's more on the career management side. But better to get the opportunities than not, even if it isn't something that you're interested in. And then just a word of caution while we're on LinkedIn and jobs and people reaching out. Exercise a certain degree of caution when you do get messages from people offering you jobs. There are a lot of scams I've seen going around LinkedIn. The one thing I'll say to everyone is use some caution. If it seems too good to be true or too easy, then that should really get your guard up and do some due diligence. Luckily, with Google these days, you can do a little bit of sleuthing and really start to uncover whether something's legit or not. But that would be my one, takeaway for people is if it's too easy, it's probably not legitimate. Good companies are not going to reach out and just say, "Hey, I found your profile on LinkedIn. Do you want a job? Send me your bank account information so we can get started." They're going to reach out and say, "I found your profile. I like, it seems like it could be a fit. Would you like an interview?" No one legitimate in my mind will go right from to job offers. If they do, it's probably a scam.
Well, it kind of comes full circle to your earlier point. If you see something like that and you do some research, it should become a little more obvious. Plus, that research is important anyways, if it's a legitimate offer to prepare you for the interview. So it's kind of, even more emphasis on doing that research ahead of time. So I think that's a really important kind of insight that you've shared with us, Nathan, is just how important, and for a couple different reasons, that research ahead of time is, but also that, it's valuable to start putting your skills on LinkedIn early, even if people aren't reaching out. One reason that comes to mind is that some of these things are difficult to remember, years later. So
Mhm.
if you start it while you're in it, it's going to be maybe the best representation of it. And then you never know, along the way, someone may go, "Hey, that is something I'm looking for." And it's that same kind of connection that you're hoping to make in the interview. Um, but I know we don't have too much more of your time today, Nathan. So I know we're coming up on the end of what we scheduled here. I just have one more quick question, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Well, just from your perspective here, having, been part of the Connector program for a while now, and working with businesses to find job seekers, are you noticing any trends in the types of roles or skills that businesses are looking for?
It really depends, I think, on the sector. Definitely anything STEM related, I think there's always going to be a demand for. Now, the tech sector in particular did, soften in 2023 with some of the big layoffs. But we're seeing, I think, good signs for this year. The skills I think businesses look for, outside of some of the hard skills, that you may need to do a job, I still think it's, work ethic, tenure, and that's a big one that I see people kind of screwing up on now is they job hop around a lot.
Oh,
And, that is a red flag to businesses that, if you have a series of very short jobs that aren't contracts and you're just, this company offered me a couple dollars more, so I moved there, but then I didn't like them, so I moved here a few months later. Um, that type of thing really is a big red flag to business. But I think, yeah, looking for the core skills that you can't teach, the communication skills, the kind of the drive. Businesses are looking for people that are going to help them be successful. and how they get along well with others. So people who aren't going to drive attrition, is definitely a good selling point as well.
True.
And kind of what I see, I'll tell you kind of where I see people missing out on what businesses are looking for.
Yeah, please do.
So yeah, especially I would say among younger professionals, there often is a mentality of, I'm never going to stop job searching. And that, I can, if someone offers me a little bit better job, I'll take it. And then, but it doesn't take too long that, if you have a series of very short jobs in a 2 or 3 year stretch, you can get labeled as a job hopper. And no matter how good your background is, if an employer doesn't think they're going to retain you, they're most likely not going to go down the path of hiring you. It's very expensive, time consuming to hire and onboard. So yeah, I think employers are looking for people who can demonstrate how they can help the employer be successful. That there's for the good jobs, I find there's always competition. And anyone listening to this should start to figure out what is your value proposition. Sometimes people call it an elevator pitch, but figure out when you are job searching, why are you a good candidate? Why are you a better candidate for me for the job you're applying for? Because you have to be able to sell that to an employer. I think sometimes people rely on employers just thinking they're great, or reading between the lines to find something that's interesting with them. You've really got to kind of sell that to the employers. And then I think, looking for ways, not just running the job search that everyone else is running, kind of getting past what employers are looking for and how do you get to the employer. I ask everyone coming through Connector, what does your job search look like? 95% of people say, I wake up, I go to LinkedIn, Jobs, Career Beacon, and Indeed. And that's it. Those are all good resources. I encourage everyone keep an eye on those. But be aware that everyone's looking at those three spots. So the job that you see that you love is getting a lot of visibility. One tip I like to give is looking at industry associations. So instead of just relying on job boards, start to build target lists of companies. And industry associations are a great starting point for that, because they very easily identify who are a lot of companies involved in a given sector. And from there, you can use LinkedIn to try and connect with some people, look for opportunities to network with that company. But don't just run a very basic job search where you wake up, you fire a generic resume to 50 companies who are on Career Beacon today, and then you're done by 9:30 in the morning and you're just waiting for the phone to ring. A surprising number of people run that job search, and it can be effective, but there's a lot of people running the same one. So do what other people are not doing, I think.
That,
And
yeah.
sometimes that maybe is dropping into an employer. I used to do that in my recruiting days. That I would just do drop-ins. Very few people do that nowadays. Now, you may not get past the lobby, but hey, the initiative, if you do it consistently, I believe will pay off.
I agree. I've tried that once or twice, and every now and then you do get lucky. Someone has a meeting canceled, and they say, "Yeah, I'll talk to you for 15 minutes." Um, Maybe the last question I have for you, Nathan, is just how can people learn more about the Connector program? How can job seekers do you apply to be part of it? How can they learn more about the work you do and connecting with you?
So everything with the Connector program is on Halifax Partnership's website, including a submission form if you're interested in participating. The general criteria for coming through the program, you have to be unemployed or underemployed. So if you're in your career and just want a different job, you've got the bandwidth. You can figure that out. We want to help the people who are looking to get into their career or who are in survival jobs. So, and the backgrounds that we do our best work with, anything IT related, we're generally pretty good in. Engineering, accounting, banking, financial services, human resources, what else? Marketing, communications. But definitely anyone who's looking to get into some of the key growth sectors, and in particular, ocean tech, clean tech, the world of IT, we are a pretty good resource. Now, we don't operate as a job search, so we're intentional networking. So we meet with people, talk about the labor market, their jobs, so try and pass on some information, and then look to introduce people to professionals who work in that industry or that profession. And then
Right.
ask that that person introduce them to a few others that they know. So sometimes it does lead into job opportunities, but it isn't the expectation that it's really an opportunity to get your network started when you're, either new to the workforce or new to the city and don't know people. But, we always encourage people use us as a tool in your job search, but not the only tool. You still want to be out there networking yourselves. You still want to go on LinkedIn, try and use that to network, but we are a good resource to make some connections. You do, if you're in school, you have to be within 6 months of graduating or have already graduated post-secondary.
Gotcha.
So if you're earlier in your academic journey, use the time now to network yourself. Go through Eventbrite, find some events, look up Halifax Partnership, the Halifax Chamber, and get out there and, just meet people. I've seen so many students find success by really putting the effort and initiative into networking themselves. So that would be my biggest advice is, if you're a little ways further from graduating, don't just sit back like I did and say, oh yeah, I'll deal with that down the road when I'm about to graduate. Start now, go to some events. It's going to be hard at first. It gets easier. But, that I find is key because the thing with networking, especially if you're early in your career and you've got a resume that looks like a lot of other people's resumes, so, well educated, you know, service level, retail level occupations. The way that you can really sell yourself is in person because if you just submit digital resumes, so many people have similar backgrounds that it really is hard for a recruiter to know who are the superstars, who aren't.
Right.
So you can, do so much more selling yourself in 5 minutes in person with somebody than you can do with a resume. And then I find it is a numbers game. That if you go to one networking event and you say hi to one person, the odds of that person being able to impact your career journey are pretty small. But
Right.
if you go to 100 events and say hi to 1,000 people, your odds of hitting one that could impact your journey are much, much higher.
That
So
is super
play the
helpful.
numbers.
Yeah, that makes total sense, Nathan. And thanks for the insights on how the connector program itself works, and just for all the practical advice you've given us today, and for sharing your personal stories. I think people are going to learn a ton from your experience. So, yeah, thank you for making the time to speak with me today. I really appreciate getting a chance to learn from you.
Sounds good. Yeah, anytime.
Awesome. Have a great rest of your day there, Nathan, and we'll talk soon then.
All right. You have a good day as well.
Thank you.
Bye.